So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and a little bit of a change of plan because I felt like doing this one before the Osgiliath siege purely because I've seen this map less than Osgiliath over the time that I've been doing these replays, and at this stage in time that is good enough to bump you up a couple of places in the run order, as I have said a couple of times before. Nothing has shown me that people are creatures of habit more than doing this content for YouTube. Because time and time again you'll see Versagath and the like be utilised over and over again. This is a map, however, that doesn't get shown quite as much. We have seen it a couple of times in the past, but nowhere near as much as Osgiliath, so we'll give Osgiliath at least another couple of days to breathe, because that will be the next replay that comes out after this one, I believe, because I do also have a Cardland outpost and a Merlond one upcoming, but I think of those, I think Osgiliath is probably the best follow-up to this one. Now this is a map which I think originally came from Divide and Conquer, or at least the base for it did, because I know that this is the same settlement they utilised for Austin Athiel and Athalond over there. I think, you know, it's sort of like the generic settlement for Elven Ruins, but I think those are the only two places where it shows up in DAC on the map. But regardless, it is a relatively open settlement, much like the last one that Eclipse sent me, albeit that Northman town does have towers and it does have palisade walls, and I think the hills are a little bit more comforting for the defenders in that sort of situation, whereas on this occasion I think the attackers have got a slightly easier time of it, depending on how they choose to approach things. And it was Eclipse who sent me this battle replay, and once again he's on the defence, this time as Cardland's sister kingdom, however, Arthedain. We shall see if the other Arnorian petty kingdom suffers the same fate that Cardland did last time, when those Black Wolves came to finish off the final Cardland defenders. In and amongst the Elven Ruins, we shall see. Starting off with Pantagruel, who's going to be playing as Mordor. A lot of people like to play them as a quality-focused faction in Reforged, to be honest with you. Like I've said time and time again, I actually think that does them a little bit of a disservice, or it does your allies a bit of a disservice on the attack, because while you will be able to play with some fun toys, I do think that oftentimes if you go numbers-focused as Mordor, you can really accent your allies' efforts really very nicely. Morannon Halberds should do quite well against standard Arthedain infantry. Having said that, one of Arthedain's biggest and most numerous strengths is their pikes. So obviously pikes against halberds, pikes will win because they have superior range and a superior animation. So it's going to be quite difficult, I think, for something like these Morannon Halberds to get as much value off as they would against certain other factions. Having said that, they're still worthwhile to bring because they are the only phalanx unit you have available to you as Mordor, and if you can make them avoid the pikes, they will still be very, very efficient against the Arthedain infantry. We have the Minas Morgul Chosen, which at this time of day do tend to blend into one black shape, but they are very nice heavy spears. They won't win any contests in terms of the outright killing power that they have relative to a lot of other Mordor's tools, considering their cost, but they are very, very durable, and that can be very useful against a faction which has got some of the higher tier stuff, especially at range, that Arthedain have. The Minas Morgul Chosen will be a little bit better at absorbing that punishment. There's another unit of them there. Orc fodder, several rams. You don't really need siege equipment in a settlement like this, of course, because there are no walls. You can just walk straight on in. Well, walk straight on into the enemy's defensive line at any rate, without fortifications. Orc fodder, natural to bring them. They're so cheap. The advantage to playing as all of the Orc factions, other than Isengard really, but then even the Dunadine clansmen are very, very cheap. Maybe not quite as cheap as something like the Orc fodder, but it just helps to pad out your line a little bit. Anyway, Morannon Halberds, Olag High, very, very nice if you can get them into the right engagement. Like I said, though, Trolls in Reforged, they're a unit which requires a lot more finesse than you would think to look at them. If you just send them barreling into the Arthedain line, stuff like the Dunadine units at the high end, and some of their armour-piercing projectiles like their Wardens of the North and their Dunadine Troll Slayers, of course, are going to be very effective against the Olag High. So timing is really everything with the Trolls. If you commit them at the right time, perhaps with a push alongside the Blackguard of Barad-dûr here, they can be very effective. Blackguard of Barad-dûr, of course, that great shield infantry, they can shove their way through lines very nicely, which makes them a no-brainer really to bring against Arthedain, because one of Arthedain's biggest strengths, as we've already mentioned, is their pikes. Having a unit like this means that if Arthedain don't have enough on the front line and they're relying solely on their pikes, you can push them out of the way. which is very, very nice. Temple Executioners are over here without the armour upgrade, but they don't really need it to be really, really effective, to be honest with you. And to be honest, Arthedain don't really have a heavy swordsman along these lines, which is on the same level as the Temple Executioners. The closest thing would be the Wardens of the North, but they of course are a steel bowman unit first and foremost, more akin to the Temple Executioners facsimile in at range anyway, I should say, the Temple Guard. We've got some Nazgul over here as well. They can just be sort of mixed into your lines, and slowly but surely they will grind up a very nice kill count. Orc Javelins, a nice cheap armour-piercing projectile, which will be very nice at helping to soften up those inevitable Arthedain phalanxes. A couple of units of Morannon Archers, which will be able to skirmish reasonably nicely with some of the lower tier of Arthedain Archers, but they will of course lose the skirmish fight, but it's important here for the attackers to try and eat up as much of Arthedain's ammunition as they possibly can. We do have as well the Temple Guard over here, so they are very similar to the Wardens of the North in a lot of ways. I think they've got better armour than the Wardens of the North, and the Wardens of the North have got slightly better defensive values elsewhere. I think the Temple Guard are superior to them in melee overall, but it is something to watch out for. The ranged attack, after all, first and foremost, is what both units are used for. And finally, the Melkor's Chosen, a wise choice by Pantagruel, I think, because Arthedain are one of the factions more likely perhaps to sally out with some nasty cavalry, as we've already seen in the town centre, and the Melkor's Chosen will be very good, the Caragor riders, at dealing with them. Then we have just an Orc playing as the Witch Realm of Angmar, rather fittingly. Angmar Halberds, very similar to the Morannon Halberds, only I think their armour is actually slightly lower, which for Angmar is actually the exception really, rather than the rule, because Angmar are actually quite a durable faction overall, but still, they're useful for the same reason that the Morannon Halberds are. There's a few officers in there as well. I don't believe there's much of anything else in here other than the halberd, so a thick halberdier line. He's also got some Goblin Band, looking like he's gone a little bit more numbers focused than the average Angmar player does. He's got some Snaga and some Goblins, as well as a lot of regular Angmar halberds. We'll see if that pays off. I think, yeah, we'll see. It's an interesting move for an Angmar player to make. Snaga Stalkers also, we've got some Trolls of Gundabad, again very similar to the Olag High, not quite as strong I don't believe, but the same sort of thing applies here as well. Warg Skirmishers, useful for dealing with any of the marauding Arthedain cavalry. Blackwatch Legion are a superior Great Shield infantry unit to the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, but there are fewer of them, so they're even more flash in the pan than their Mordor equivalents. Witch-Arm Scourge Raiders, without the armour upgrade, they may have the jet black coloration, but they don't have the helmets. Throwing projectiles, of course, will be useful for the same reason the Orc Javelins are, especially against those Arthedain pikes. Witch-Arm Hammer Guard, brutal armour-piercing damage on them. It looks as though he's actually gone for 2 units of them based on how long his lineup of Hammer Guard is there. I don't think it's worth going into the red limit for them, but they are very effective. I see the Witchers in there, they can't escape my watchful gaze. And then there's some Skirmishers, there's also some Trolls of Angmar. It does look as though he's gone into the red limit, to be honest, on a couple of units, which is questionable. But he does have the Witch-Arm Blackguard as well, which is not the general, interestingly enough, but still nice to see them. Interesting army composition that, not typical by any means. And finally, Lord Touch Me is playing as another Mordor army. He's got a Troll Catapult, so quicker around the battlefield, which is good, it's useful. Orc Fodder as well, guarding them. He's got some Sauron's Will, which are of course an armour-piercing shock troop, better than the average lower tier orcs that usually these kind of factions traffic in. Sauron's Will be able to do some nice armour-piercing damage up close to the men of Arthedain. Orc Fodder and Morannon Archers once again. Other than that, it's looking fairly similar. The Sauron's Will and the Troll Catapult, the main difference. Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Well, I say that, there's some Troll Drummers as well. There's Olag High, Temple Guard and Morannon Archers. He's also gone for a unit of cavalry, but not the Melkor's Chosen, the Temple Inquisitors, but still. Similar things apply to... Actually, he's gone for 2 units of cavalry. Lots of cavalry for the attackers here, which I think maybe they've gone for a little bit too much cavalry. They should be very well prepared for dealing with an Arthedain sally out, but ultimately they need enough infantry to overwhelm the Arthedain defences. I'm not convinced this much cavalry is going to facilitate that. And he's got some Uruk Captains back here, which are an armour-piercing Orc Captain unit, which is very, very nice. Now then, onto the defenders. Eclipse, 2500 of the Dark Cloud, both defenders playing as Arthedain. Dismounted 4 Nosterine Knights, or Rain Knights I should say. Going to be very good against particularly the lower tier units of Orcs, because huge base attack. Not armour piercing, but of course against the lower tier of Orcs that's not really too important. So Arthedain have got quite a few tools actually that can deal with more numerous factions. You can hold the enemy at bay with a lot of pikes, the armour upgrade from Alexander 10Q. Heading over here, we've got some Evandim Spearmen as well. The Militia Spear, which is one of the best units of militia in the game, to be honest with you, with how useful it is. The classic Arthedain double act of their pikes and spears don't do damage quickly, but very difficult to knock over. Evandim Archers as well will be useful for skirmishing with the Morannon Archers and the like. The unupgraded pikes are here with some more dismounted Fornost Rhine Knights. We have over here, of course, the Evandim Spearmen. As I've said time and time again, one of the most disingenuous unit models in the game. Not because of it looks bad, far from it, it looks very good. And that's part of the problem. They're a militia unit, so don't let the full plate armour and resplendent Numenorian look fool you. They are not all that effective when it comes to punching above their weight class, especially in melee, so do look out for that. Dunadine Troll Slayers, very, very useful unit. They'll be able to deal with the higher tier of, particularly the monstrous units, the Olag High, you know, the Trolls of Angmar, Trolls of Gundabad. It's in the name, really, isn't it? Troll Slayers. But any armoured unit is going to struggle against their axes and javelins. Dunadine Peacekeepers are in there as well. Kind of the opposite thing, really. They'll do really nicely against lightly armoured orcs because, again, they don't have armour piercing with that axe, but they do have a really high base attack. Unsurprisingly, we've got a unit of Dunadine Rangers. Make the most of those body-piercing projectiles. They won't be here forever. And then some Knights of Illuminus as well. They're going to really struggle, to be honest with you, to get any sort of value off in this situation. But they're the only unit of cavalry I can really see, to be honest with you, which means all of that attacking cavalry might end up being largely wasted. You've got some a dismounted version of the same unit as well. More Dunadine Peacekeepers, a lot more pikes, more knights, some gate guards, obviously very useful for keeping things in check on the front line, a superior pike to the regular one. The rank and file Arthedain men-at-arms are in here as well with their full armour upgrade. They've got the same upgrade as the Evandim Spearmen, but they are a tier above. They're not militia, they're sort of your bread and butter unit, really. There is another unit of dismounted, or mounted Knights of Illuminus, I should say. Some Dunadine Rangers. A few of these units have been left behind. You'll need to scurry inside pretty quickly. Catapult, Arthedain Marksmen, and over here we've got yet more Troll Slayers and some Wardens of the North. So the cream of the crop when it comes to the Dunadine is out here, but they're going to need to be quite quick to get inside the settlement. The orcs are upon them. And without further ado, let's begin. So I'm not sure, really. Under normal circumstances, I often give the attackers a little bit of a natural advantage because of their numbers, and oftentimes that is how it goes. If you have the superior numbers, you know, and a thinking human, not the AI, tends to make far better use of it, so you often end up losing. On this occasion, though, all of that cavalry may prove to be a little bit costly, and it's not really cheap cavalry either. Even warg skirmishers run you a decent amount of money that you could spend on something like Gundabad Guard. Temple Inquisitors, Melkor's Chosen, 2 units of mounted wargs, another unit of Melkor's Chosen. You're approaching 4,000 florins worth of units there, which may not be all that useful. Looking at all of those mounted units, if I were the defenders, I would keep my Knights of Illuminus right in the town centre and save them for later, because sending them out now is not likely to yield much in the way of results. Later on, however, that may be very, very different, and of course the attacking cavalry will just have to bide its time and wait, and if it throws itself against the Arthedain pike line, that is kamikaze tactics, to say the least. Well, you can see over here the dismounted Fornost Arraign Knights moving back within the sound. I do love the sword model that the dismounted Fornost Arraign Knights have. Calling it a forgery of Anduril is maybe a little bit harsh on it, but it is. Counterfeit Andurils, or Narseals, depending on how you wish to term it. But yes, Arthedain, lots of pikes, as you would expect, and just throwing themselves against that pike line is going to be quite costly for the attackers here. Time will tell whether they have any sort of success. It is slow going to get up this hill, to be fair, so while they were deployed sort of outside the settlement in a way, the terrain does them a bit of a favour there. These elven ruins do tend to be placed upon these hills. I think that is the case with Athalond and Austin Field. I think the only real difference between the two in Dak is their surrounding location, Athalond being on the coast. This, of course, based on the people involved today, is going to be EREGION. Evandim Archers. Interesting, there's not a huge amount of archer power on display here. Arthedain. They haven't over-committed on their archers, which I think is good. They still have a good number of them, which is natural if you're Arthedain on the defence. You have the ability to hold the line with your infantry, but not necessarily to do the business in terms of damage. It's going to be down to your javelins, your rangers, your bowmen, to be able to do that instead. The deep breath before the plunge here. Time will tell how this goes. I mean, the Orc fodder are going to struggle. We'll learn pretty quickly, I think, what direction this battle is going in, based on how the attackers decide to approach this. If they send in their Orc fodder without support, they're going to be bleeding manpower pretty early. And they're also going to be giving the Arthedain pikemen, a relatively low damage unit, the opportunity to get some good damage done. Pantagruel over here is not too eager to move in just yet. His allies have slowly started shifting towards the front, but he himself has not. Perhaps he has been willing to give the Arthedain players the ability or the opportunity to move backwards, but I think by this point, to be fair, the Arthedain players have had plenty of opportunities to get their Dunadine out of there, so those Wardens of the North, you could potentially take a few pot shots with Moran on archers. They're a high enough profile unit, I think, that you could even justify using the Temple Guard on them. And the Knights of Anubis, you've got plenty of tools in terms of halberdiers and Melkor's Chosen that you can use to jump on the Knights of Anubis, the mounted variant, should they come forward too quickly. Evandim archers in a decent position. I mean, a lot of the arrows will probably hit the dirt just in front of them trying to defend this front ramp. This front line is also entirely made up of Evandim Spearmen. But the vultures are circling. The enemy riders are here. Temple Inquisitors, I think, are going to be heading over to the other side. And are they going to go back inside the settlement? I would recommend it. I think Eclipse is sort of seeing which way the wind is blowing here, because the Warg Skirmishers are on the way, Temple Inquisitors are on the way, there's already a unit Melkor's Chosen on this side of the battlefield. You're not really going to be able to achieve a whole lot. If you charged into the Warg Skirmishers, you would do a ton of damage to them, to be fair, but the attackers, at this point, if I were the attackers, and these were the compositions I was working with, I would be thrilled at the opportunity to use them in even a semi-efficient manner. Because if the defenders play their cards right, they could really take away the ability for those cavalry units to get their value off. The skirmishers can still be utilised, of course, to do a little bit of damage. Arthedain marksman, this might be a little bit of a mistake. Lord Touchme has got the opportunity here to get his Melkor's Chosen in and amongst some of Eclipse's Arthedain marksmen. And I think here he was too busy trying to get his cavalry back inside the settlement, and as a result, he's going to be chased down by these mace-wielding Black Numenorians. I assume they're Black Numenorians anyway. They may have horned helms, but maybe twisted Black Numenorians. Yeah, this is not great for the Arthedain marksmen as they slowly try and trudge their way out of this position that they had taken up. They are getting absolutely mulched by the Melkor's Chosen. Those very large spiked maces doing the business. Wardens of the North firing in. So some armour-piercing missiles in return, but there are worse targets, to be honest with you, from a Mordor perspective, that those Wardens of the North could be going after. And they've already managed to carve a chunk out of those marksmen. Not going to be able to go any further, of course, with the spears and the pikes braced and in position. But I like that. Opportunistic from Mordor. And that's how you have to be, to use cavalry on the attack. The greenery sprouting from these old elven towers. Temple Inquisitors just in behind these ruined walls. I can understand why, to be honest with you, the attackers are not overly keen on charging forward too quickly. A lot of halberdiers involved in all of the compositions today for the attackers, and they will immediately be focused down by even basic Arthedain archers, and that would be enough to get a lot of value off. Orc fodder forming up. No danger of them really being shot, and even if they are, that's the sort of thing that Mordor will most certainly want. Arthedain marksmen moving forward, Orc skirmishers getting into position. What is Just an Orc going to do here? I mean, he should still have his javelin, should he not? Yeah, and I think the fact that they're even getting it, well, there is a dead pike over here, so yeah, the javelins are actually, they may be on fire at will there. But I mean, the javelins, you'd be well, I think you'd well suited, I think, to get the javelins in and out quickly and start doing some hit and run tactics on these phalanxes. Something along those lines at any rate, but it looks as though the north is going to be where we're going to start to see some action first. Arthedain Marksman coming out again. I'm a little bit surprised that Eclipse has gone for another bite of the cherry, to be honest with you, because he's not likely to get a huge amount of efficiency when going after Moran archers like this, and he's just opening himself up to be attacked by the Melkor's Chosen once more. Again, there's those armour-piercing missiles coming in. That's a little bit more of a devastating volley, to be honest with you, into the Melkor's Chosen. I mean, you could justify that, and that's clearly what they're thinking. Draw the Melkor's Chosen in and then use the Warns of the North on them. But, like I said, the Melkor's Chosen, are they really that dangerous in this situation? Later on they could be when you want to break out with your cavalry, but I'm not sure. Meanwhile, they've come back again. Warns of the North going to be able to get in there, but yeah, these Arthedain marksmen taking some damage. Moranon archers as well going to be going after these Arthedain pikemen now that they've broken away from the support of the men-at-arms they were with. Even basic orc archers will be able to do some damage to them. No armour upgrades on them either. We'll go over here, some orc fodder. You'd be well served, I think, getting your archers into a slightly closer position, because you're going to land some hits here, but it's a difficult angle. Over here as well, we do have some armour upgrades. The Arthedain men-at-arms fully upgraded. The pikemen as well only have the one level of upgrade you can apply to them with those breastplates. Meanwhile, Arthedain marksmen starting to shoot into Pantagruel's wing of the attack, going after some of the units that are in behind. I think he's going after the Moranon archers. I mean, to be honest, you might be well served going after the halberdiers, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Any arrows that miss the archers will hit the halberdiers, so you get a 2 for the price of 1 type deal here. But Mordor being cautious, but not overly so. Those Knights of Innuminus could come out, break forwards, and try and charge forth. The catapult is menacingly up there on the high ground as well. Yeah, like with the walk skirmishers, probably isn't worth your while to go here. Angmar need to start moving forwards a little bit. Mordor is starting to put some light pressure on the defenders. Unity is very important in this sort of situation for you. Quite surprising as well to see the pikemen move forwards, to be honest with you, because the shots they were taking before the archers weren't really all that effective. Going after the fodder. Again, this is more very similar to what happened on the other side, where the Warns of the North drew the Melkor's Chosen in. On this occasion, the Arthedain infantry suffering much the same thing. Not really worth your time going after orc fodder like this. Yes, you'll massacre them, but you're opening yourselves up for better shots from the Moranon archers, and especially on your pikemen. So much of the Arthedain defence here is going to depend on how much of a workload the pikemen can shoulder. Blackguard and Barad-dûr trudging their way into position as well. Orc fodder over here. More missiles coming in, but the pikes now are back in position in behind the men-at-arms, of course, individually. Some of these men will fall as this individual moves to take his dead friend's place on the front. But these shielded infantrymen will do a far better job at absorbing shots than the pikes, and the pikes are more important later on when the going gets tough in melee. Meanwhile, Arthedain men-at-arms, these ones have the upgrade, the breastplate upgrade, so they're going to be very useful at skirmishing with the enemy. Got a pretty good angle of fire here as well. I think they are going after the halberdiers now also, which is a good choice. They've already clipped the wings, rather, of these Moranon archers over here. And I think this is going to follow, this battle's going to follow a pattern of the orcs just trying to soften the enemy up, prepare the ground a little bit, and then later on in the battle I think we're going to see an all-out offensive. Snaga Stalkers moving forward, so Angmar now moving forth. Looking like some dead Temple Inquisitors, probably coaxed away from their position by a couple of volleys. Not entirely sure why rams have been pushed forward. Ooh, hello. Is that the Troll Catapult firing into the core of the defence? And those are both two units of Dunadine Rangers from... Actually no, it's a unit of Dunadine Rangers and a unit of Dunadine Troll Slayers, but a very worthwhile target to go after. Even if you're just taking away from the DPS they can do. And it'll definitely make the defenders feel just that little bit more uncomfortable with their position. Which, at the moment, I mean, It's a bit of a slow burn, this one. This, however, in come the Black Guard of Barad-dûr, Morannon archers in behind them offering some support, firing some volleys up here. And they do manage to connect pretty well with those dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights. They do have some good armour, of course, but no shield. Which, for a unit that expensive, you can't really afford to allow them to get shot like this. I mean, I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, the Black Guard have been committed forward with only a battered unit of Orc fodder for company. They're not really going to be able to force their way through this position at all well. Meanwhile, clearly the catapult is now going to try and shoot in here, and they have succeeded to a certain extent, going through the line. If one of those projectiles manages to hit centre mass of these units here, not a bad shot at all. Through the phalanx at the front and connecting as well with the Arthedain marksmen in behind. There's some troll slayers here as well. Arthedain won't be too concerned by this, but it does just let them know they're not going to be able to have things all their own way in these kind of engagements early on, which is where Arthedain will feel quite comfortable with their ability to skirmish for an elongated period. And a lot of their units are very capable as well of absorbing most of what Mordor can chuck out. The catapult, of course, being a bit of an exception there. Temple Guardsmen as well. Angmar menacing the southern approach now as well. I mean, I suppose you could push the ram through the line. It has that effect after all. It can be a little bit awkward. That could end up working against them as the battle goes on there. If they want to push forwards, it helps having a clean space. And stuff like the Blackwatch Legion could get caught up on them. But early on, I mean, you will punch a hole through the spears, but you'll need more than Snaga Stalkers to take advantage of that hole that you make. So time will tell if Angmar are going to be doing that or just allowing the Snaga to get butchered en masse by the professional soldiery of Arthedain. Arthedain marksmen continuing to fire in. Orc fodder over there. Ooh. I think they're trying to shoot the Arthedain artillery piece there, but they're going to have to thread the needle even when they're not on flaming shot. Olag High moving forward, and the Morannon archers out of ammunition, so this is a little bit more like it when it comes to offering a little bit of support for the Black Guard of Barad-dûr, and to be fair, those Olag High will actually do quite well against Arthedain men-at-arms and pikemen. The problem will be if, obviously, Troll Slayers come forward, but even stuff like dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights are also going to be really, really good at burning through the Olag High. In come the Olag High now. Victory is almost a certainty. I'm not sure if that will still be the case, and actually there are dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights here, so the further in these trolls push, with each mighty swing of their clubs and hammers, they will find themselves more and more in the company of units which are better suited for dealing with them. Speaking of which, the very best unit for dealing with them, of course, is Troll Slayers. And they are going to use their javelins here. I don't know how many of them will connect with the trolls per se. Even if they miss, they'll hit something in behind though. It looks like they're just going to hold their ground and wait. Using missiles on trolls when they're in and amongst your own men, after all, is a little bit of an awkward proposition. Still Morannon archers trying to do some damage, trying to soften up the Arthedain front line. They've had limited success with this thus far, I think it's fair to say. As more arrows hit the dirt just in front of those men of Arthedain. Evandim Spears are also here. Meanwhile, here are Angmar trying to engage in those shenanigans, but Arthedain didn't actually let them. They pushed down into the Snaga rather quickly, and again, if you've only got Snaga on the front line, the most basic Arthedain units will be able to deal with them. I mean, the Wargs are here, but they're not going to be able to get clean charges off at all. In fact, doing this with the Rams is going to make that even less likely. Scourge Raiders are a bit more of a concern. Those Goblin Band just returned to hiding. They needed at least some halberdiers to give a bit of armour-piercing edge there. Meanwhile, Warns of the North closing into melee. They may very well have used up most, if not all, of their ammunition already going after those Melkors chosen. And they're going to butcher them around on archers. And what I feared slightly is coming to pass. Mordor and Angmar just aren't committing enough quality to the front line in enough numbers. This front line over here is kind of the exception to the rule, but if only one choke point is seeing genuine pressure be put upon it, then it makes life much easier in terms of organisation for the defenders. as the Olag Kai are in and amongst things now. They've actually done quite well in this fight with the support of the Blackguard and of the out of ammo Moranon archers. They have actually managed to do a good job. A whole fresh unit, however, a fully upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms is going to shore things up. That's a lot of men of the west that these trolls are going to have to try and smash their way through. They're well suited for fighting a lower damage unit of line infantry like this, though. And the Olag Kai, I mean, when they start to fall, they will fall away pretty quickly, as is the way with multiple HP units. Pressure being put onto this front line now as well, fodder and halberdiers, but this is a very well prepared front line, and Arthedain won't be too worried about this line falling in the immediate future. Orc fodder heading that way. Some Blackguard of Barad-dûr, however, once this front line has taken a bit more damage, could push them back. They could be used now just to put a dent in the line and then maybe follow through with even more infantry. Time will tell whether that is the way they want to approach things. A fresher unit of halberdiers there. Dunadine Rangers waiting menacingly. Some structures in the way, though. They don't have a clear shot because those elven buildings are in the way. Meanwhile, Angmar comprehensively beaten back, really. There's a lot of dead Evandims here, which, again, the wargs were able to get in amongst things a little bit, but yeah, Angmar, they need to get an attack going again relatively quickly. They can't afford to just hover around here on the periphery of the fight, because the longer they do that, the more likely it is their Mordor brethren will start to fall away pretty quickly. Some pretty savage hits there from the Troll Catapult into the centre of this Arthedain position. Considering Wards of the North are in and amongst here, it is worthwhile to go after. Doesn't look like they actually scored any hits on the Wardens themselves with the Catapult, though. Still 64 of them remain, and they are going to be able to do a lot of damage here to these pitch black Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Those long swords are going to feast well. Meanwhile, Temple Executioner's moved forward. This is more like it. Lord Touchme has been the one most willing to push in and really put pressure on. The Olag Kai have been dealt with now, and Gate Guards are on the front line as well as the mighty dismounted Knights of Illuminas. Sauron's will hold for a time, but they're going to need to hope those Temple Guard can dump their ammunition pretty quickly here. But it's a good idea. They've got a very, very clear shot. The problem is, Arthedain, as soon as they see this, they're going to try and push right on through to get to these Black Númenóreans. They besmirched the good name of steel bowmen everywhere by bending to Sauron's desire. But they are going to gun down many of their distant cousins. Well, this front line has actually buckled more than I thought it would under the weight of these Blackguard of Barad-dûr. Adonai's shadow bows are over here as well, who are, of course, the Mordor Arranger, albeit a Black Númenórean in Mordor garb. Got, good potential to do damage there. They did reinforce with more halberdiers as well, so I like this. The attackers, they were cautious earlier on, maybe overly so, and now they're going after good targets as well. Rangers going after Troll Slayers. As soon as that second hit point is gone, they will fall away really very quickly. Angmar now need to do the same, if I'm honest. They're trying to go in here, trying to skirmish with the enemy, so at least they're testing Arthedain's defences somewhat. But even if it's just sending some more Snaga forward, it would be worthwhile to do. Meanwhile, over here, Sauron's will on the front line, offering that armour-piercing bite. The Warns of the North is still better than any single unit Mordor has, but again, Arthedain will be very dependent on pikes to keep dangerous units like the Sauron's Will out of swinging range. 79 Blackguard move forward, though. That is a sign that even though they have started to commit forward, they haven't committed forward quite enough. Temple Guard continuing to shoot. They need to continue to do so. The Temple Executioners actually doubled back and came over here. They're taking shots from the Arthedain marksmen. They don't need to worry about that too much, though. Multiple HP as they are, and very well armoured also. And they need to keep fighting in here. Ooh, they're going after the wrong target. That's disappointing to see. Again, it's the sign of panic in many ways that, Arthedain will be overjoyed at the fact that those armour-piercing arrows are being used on a unit of basic marksmen when their infantry is wide open for those armour-piercing missiles to go after. Dunadine Troll Slayers are here as well. Mounted Knights of Illuminus are coming back. Temple Executioners fighting evenly on the front line though. Outnumbered though they may be. Yeah, now with javelins coming in, it's a different proposition entirely. These Temple Guard will start to fall away very quickly. Now they're going after Knights of Anubis. They really should be trying to go after Troll Slayers. I still would have shot into the blob, to be honest with you, because it would give you the leg up in terms of the infantry fight. But now Arthedain have managed to rally a little bit, and now if the Troll Slayers can get in behind the lines, go after the Temple Guard in melee, the numbers are such the Troll Slayers should be just fine. And those armour-piercing axes will do the business. Ooh. Not a bad idea, but you run the risk of hitting your own men as well. What's happening over here? Are the Warns of the North still going to be victorious? I think they are, although they're actually pulling back, which is a risky move from Eclipse. He's betting on the fact that his pikes are going to be enough now to kill the Sauron's Will, which they will, as long as no extra reinforcements arrive. And there are drummers that could be committed, Blackguard have returned from routing, and of course Uruk captains, with that armour-piercing bite they have with their hooked orcish swords. We shall have to wait and see. Arthedain over here, meanwhile, have shut the doors shut in Mordor's face again. Continuing to try and use their archers to wear Arthedain down. A shower of javelins, not as strong as the Trollslayer javelins, of course, but still, the casualties that they inflict will add up over time. Going after there, the Evandim Spears. 26 of them routing. So I mean, Arthedain have managed to rally over here. They have managed to hold the line, which is impressive considering they were forced onto the back foot by the Blackguard and they were being shot by shadow bows, and now they're being shot by javelins as well, which will have an impact over time. Like I said, Evandim Spears, they are a militia unit overall, so they won't mind too much that they're the unit taking the bulk of these casualties, but quantity is a quality all of its own, and if you lose too much quantity, you could be in real trouble. Troll Slayers fighting hard against the Black Numenorians here, pulling out those two-handed longswords. But they have managed to shut them down from shooting. They are going to get support from the Knights, potentially the Pikes as well. What's going on over here? Yeah, this is what I was a little bit concerned about. Arthedain having to sort of reform a line a little bit. Those Troll Slayers still have ammunition. Those Temple Inquisitors being very bold indeed to be in and amongst heavy axemen, but they broke the pikes in the end. That's what I was always a little bit afraid of with the units that were returning from routing. And there's Uruk captains back there as well, but now the Troll Slayers are being left to their own devices. They should be able to turn the tide again pretty heftily in the defenders' favour. There's not enough Sauron's Will left to really do the business, and Dunadine Peacekeepers are here to form up a secondary line as well. And Arthedain marksmen continuing to shoot at the Inquisitors and the captains. What's Angmar doing? Pushing forward a little bit more. Scourge Raiders actually using their throwing axes, trying to soften up the front line again. I don't think Arthedain will mind this too much though. Throwing axes can have a lot of their damage mitigated by a shield from the front. And these are ultimately the militia, like I said. They will do a lot of damage over time, but the Scourge Raiders could be so worrisome. I think the time has come for some sort of general Angmar advance. I mean, the Scourge Raiders will do pretty nicely in melee with the Evandim Spears as well, but they will need some support. Support that the Snaga and the Goblins are looking like they're going to be grateful to give. Evandim Archers continuing to get shot. Angmar's still trying to soften the enemy up, but his allies are moving in, which is a sign you need to also move in a little bit more of a robust manner than he is currently doing. Pantagruel trying to push through the lines once again with Blackguard and Barad-dûr. He's following through with Minas Morgul chosen as well, which I really do like. It opens him up to potential catapult shenanigans, but at the moment the only thing shooting him is Arthedain Marksman, which from the front will not do a ton of damage to either of those two units. They will also be rolling forward with Temple Guard. Morannon Archers continuing to launch some of their arrows over the broken Elven fortifications. Troll Slayers going to be firing some jabbies in. Don't have the best angle though. Another unit of infantry wouldn't go amiss. These Morannon halberds would be perfectly suited, I think. Is the catapult firing? Yes it is. I'm not too surprised to see that. As soon as Arthedain saw what was going on over here, that should have been their first port of call, and indeed it is. And they should be able to rack up a very nasty kill count here as well. But the Arthedain front line over here is crumbling. They're losing stomach for the fight here, and why wouldn't they be? But Rangers, Wardens of the North, Troll Slayers, a catapult, all of Arthedain's nastiest ranged tools are here to do significant damage to Mordor, causing the Blackguard actually to rout as a result. This is a bit of a shame, actually. Mordor had the... he did the first stage of being aggressive, but in the end he's... they're going to try and counter-skirmish into the catapult. He's pulling back now, though. All of the ground that he's made, he risks surrendering to Arthedain again, which would have made that whole push somewhat pointless. You may as well have continued to be a little bit more standoffish. If he'd managed to coordinate that with one of the pushes that Lord Touchme was doing over here, could have been quite a different story. But the Dunadine and the Innuminous Knights finishing off these mounted Black Númenóreans by sword and by axe. There's not much left. I mean, Uruk captains are pushing forward with the Nazgul that were over here, and they're actually really doing the business against Dunadine Peacekeepers. I sing the praises of the Dunadine Peacekeepers, but they are outmatched in this fight. The Nazgul and the scariest Black Uruks that Mordor can belch forth unto the land. But they have these Wards of the North. They still do have a bit of ammunition, so they'll be able to do a bit of damage as well, with the Numinous Gate Guards also ready. We shall see. Meanwhile, I think those Troll Catapults are actually doing some damage to the Arthedain infantry, trading blows back and forth with their catapults now. Arthedain Marksmen and Pikemen going forwards. They haven't gone all out in trying to reclaim their old ground. Moran on halberds being engaged by some marksmen. Those Minas Morgul chosen. You can see they got into position into a dense formation, and the Wardens of the North and the Rangers have really done the business there. The Rangers, though, one unit of Rangers at the very least, heavily damaged. Troll Slayers are here. The Blackguard are trying to push their way through. I did note, actually. Yes, here they are. The mounted Knights of Innuminous finishing off the Temple Executioners with all of their units over here. It's an opportunity now, actually, to get their cavalry out onto the open field via this way, because Lord Touchme's army is on its last legs at this point. Not a lot of cavalry left, and like I said, now that they've bided their time, those two units of Knights of Innuminous could be utterly devastating. Charging without remorse. Trying to go after the opposing catapult, I think, and they're hitting, which is fortunate. You don't really use flaming shot to go after catapults under normal circumstances. Orc javelins, however, I mean, the price of going after the Mordor catapult is that you can't go after the Orcish infantry, which, considering how densely packed it is, they may not be very expensive, but hitting centre mass could be very profitable for Arthedain. These are the choices you make, though. Will it be the right one? We shall see. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr did push forward. They did, I think, do quite a lot of damage there. Well, actually, no, they didn't. The Rangers actually just pulled back in the end. No such luck, and with Ranger arrows and Dunadine axes, those Blackguard of Barad-dûr will be on their knees very quickly. Meanwhile, Angmar, like I said, like these rams at this point, they didn't force all the way through the Arthedain lines, and so at this point they're just going to get in the way of the Angmar advance, to be honest with you. It makes the choke point more difficult to navigate, which is only going to help the defenders, unfortunately. In a rather minor way, admittedly, but it is still worth bearing in mind. Snaga are going to get absolutely ripped limb from limb by the dismounted Knights of Fornost. And over here, what very little remains of the Mordor army that spawned in the east is being finished off. 28 Knights of Innuminas. There were some Uruk captains still in there. The Nazgul are still there as well, I think. Or are they? If there aren't many of them left at all. Yeah, 10 Uruk captains that are broken. And there goes the general. When you're surrounded by that much quality and you're isolated from support, even the Nazgul are not going to do the business for you at all. And that gives the Arthedain cavalry the way onto the open field that perhaps they were waiting for. They had 2 units of Innuminous Knights, so where's the other one gone? Is it already out onto the field? I do not believe so. Troll Slayers are now going to slam into the side of the Mordor army. I have to say I have some sympathy for the Mordor forces, because at this point they desperately need Angmar to be a little bit more proactive than they're being. Angmar are just throwing their trash under the bus still. The time for that has long since passed, although to be fair, Angmar have seemingly dealt with these Knights of Annumina, so one of the units of deadly Arthedain cavalry has been thwarted. But the time has come for Angmar's infantry at this point to move in. They're still cowering behind the hill. The witches are still here. If ever there was a unit to reverse the tide in a battle, it would be them. But we shall see. We shall see. Troll Slayers into the side here. If those shadow bows still had a bit of ammunition left, then it's a real tragedy that they've been caught in melee. But I imagine that's not true. I imagine they have utilised their ammo, pulling out their long swords, going toe to toe again with their distant cousins, with those axes raining blows down. They're a little bit more at home in melee, the Troll Slayers, than the Shadow Bows are. Shadow Bows can still put up a fight though. That Arthedain pike block has broken. 35 Troll Slayers stand in the way of a seemingly inexhaustible supply of Mordor orcs. I don't believe there's much left over here. There's still, well, I say that, there's one Temple Guardsman, so he's still potentially able to contribute here to his allies' cause. And each of those that hits may very well be sufficient to kill, being that they are an AP arrow. Dunadine Troll Slayers loosing their javelins in. When I say that, that was a blank fire, that. They're blank firing constantly here. What's going on? Madness. Launching more artillery in. Ooh, they nearly cleared the settlement and hit their Angmarim allies. Although it would only have been very basic stuff. Ooh, what was that? Yep. Point blank shots from the defending catapult. This is what I was slightly concerned about. And now all of these low tier orcs, the fodder, is starting to run for the hills. It's not looking all that clever for the attackers at this point, I have to say. The Mordor armies are nearly spent. Pantagruel still has a few units that could be useful, including the catapult crew themselves, although they do well to avoid the troll catapult. Steel bowmen. But this is only going to last so long, and Angmar's window of opportunity is closing. It may have already closed, actually. They may already be too late, but it would at least be a nice gesture if he were willing to enter the breach with his allies at least once during this battle. What have we here? Still some walk skirmishes. He's still trying to find, like, it is a classic newer player thing to do, still trying to find that ideal gap. But in a siege, there's no way really that defenders are going to allow you free entry into the settlement. You are going to have to engage their defences. There's no other way around it, especially in a settlement like this, where the ways in are fairly easy to keep track of. Your infantry is going to have to take losses. This is not campaign. I'll say that until I'm blue in the face. Dunadine Troll Slayers here, as well as Warns of the North, butchering their way through some Moranon archers. A very one-sided fight indeed. But Temple Guard will put up a fight in melee. Olag High are back there as well. What's going on over here? Well, that's a little bit disappointing, I have to say, from those cavalrymen. There's still Temple Executioners and Nazgul down here. Doesn't look that good for the cavalry though, does it? I mean, the Knights of Annumina they had. There's Melkor's Chosen back here as well. So yeah, Pantagruel definitely has more than the northern Mordor army had as he attacks from the west. Still, Angmar's trash is just being cleaned up so easily by a combination of upgraded Evandim Spears and dismounted Fornosterine Knights. And so it will continue to be without some extra quality. At this point though, it's kind of doesn't really matter, because the whole point is if you attack from all directions all at once, they can't focus you all down. Now, however, with the defeat of Mordor in the north and the ever closer defeat of Mordor in the west. Angmar in the south will be focused down, so perhaps the very thing he was trying to avoid by hanging back will come to pass because he hung back too much. That may be how this goes. Orc fodder returning. Alongside the Temple Guard, they're starting to actually roll through the Dunadine Troll Slayers at this point, so they may have done a very good job on the front line, but at this point they need something over here, to be honest. And a gap may have been found in the defences that Pantagruel could potentially take advantage of that. What is going on over here? There's still just walk skirmishers. Is that lone Temple Guardsman still here? Yes, he is. I'm surprised he's gone unnoticed at this point, to be honest with you, as he fires point blank into these poor Arthedain pikemen, slowly but surely doing chip damage to them. Oof. Right to the back. He could rack up a decent little head count for himself over here if they continue to go unnoticed. Or if he, singular, continues to go unnoticed. On the front lines, however, Mordor continuing to be introduced to the meat grinder. Olakai moving forwards. Wolves of the North coming back. Yeah, and I mean, to be honest with you, the defenders haven't really finished off this Mordor army in all that convincing a fashion. And I don't know what happened to their cavalry, but if Eclipse was over here trying to utilise his Knights of Illuminus to kill off these units over here, he didn't do a very good job of it by the looks of things at all. Which, considering the advantage that cavalry afforded you, wasting it is sinful, almost. Now Angmar seems to be pushing forward in earnest a little bit more. Hammer Guard moving in, Trolls moving in. This is much more like it from Angmar. It's taken him a while, but he is now over here, and he is now putting the Arthedain front line under serious pressure that it looks like they're buckling under. 2 units of Trolls supporting Halberdiers, Witch Realm Hammer Guard. What do Arthedain do now? Because they're already being tested by Mordor. Dunadine Rangers firing in. It's not the best angle for them though, considering the amount of time they had to prepare. Made a bit of a pig's ear of this Arthedain, and considering that, that's usually a sign that the defenders are moments away from defeat. But with Rangers, who knows? Maybe they have the tools, the means to dig their way out of this. To be fair, at this point that ram is actually doing work for Angmar because it's blocking some of those shots, and any Ranger shot absorbed by something that isn't your men is a real success. Those Rangers are firing in. Trolls are moving forward. I mean, of course they'll crush Evandim archers in melee, but they really should be going after the Rangers just to shut them down, even if temporarily, because Troll Slayers are on hand to go after them. That's exactly what Angmar are doing as well, so this is good. Took them a while to get there, but Angmar is now in full flight. Temple Executioners and Olag High being committed forward by Pantagruel, and I don't know if Arthedain have got the minerals in melee to see victory out. That is Arthedain's problem, or one of Arthedain's problems. They are a little bit too reliant, perhaps, on sources other than their infantry to do their damage. Against targets like this, anyway. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus moving in. Wards of the North very close. I mean, here you can see that the Peacekeepers are getting squashed. Blackwatch Legion leading the way, but there are also Hammer Guard that will be following them in shortly, all of which tied together by a healthy amount of base AP from the Angmar Halberds, as another unit of Halberds also heads towards the front line. This is the decisive moment in the fight. Either Angmar and Mordor's final assault will peter out, or Arthedain will be crushed under its weight. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Temple Executioners are getting turned back. Pikes and Swordsmen. What do those Trolls do? They're up here. I mean, they're going to die if they stay in melee with the Troll Slayers for any length of time. The clue is in the name. The Rangers are trying to get out of melee range. 29 Fornosterine Knights are also going to move forwards. Those poor Evandim archers have been sliced through, however, in exactly the fashion that you would have imagined. Which are Hammer Guard, only 20 of them, to be honest, so they must have taken a savaging at the hands of the Rangers. There goes the other Mordor general. Pantagruel's general is trying to get his Melkor's chosen into the settlement by the looks of things. And here they are, killed off by one of the stragglers. He's going to be able to get in amongst the settlement now, though, which this is dangerous. I mean, it could be the attackers do end up utilising their cavalry effectively. Orc skirmishers are here also. They can't really take the town centre, though, because all of these units are routing, but you will bump them back into existence, for lack of a better word, by touching them with your cav and spears and pikes. Ooh, this could be a mistake. They're going to get into the settlement. They could force these units to return. Rangers firing into the Warg skirmishers. Not what you want to be doing. You want to be targeting down the Melkor's chosen. I think the pikes that were over here have probably moved at this stage. Indeed they have. They've moved over to here. But Angmar continuing to make this a messy fight, which very often favours the Orcs. Is that going to be the case here? We shall have to wait and see. Arthedain marks him with a decent shot in there, though. The Nazgul killing one of the Arthedain generals. The fact they've got rangers that are still finding positions to fire speaks well of them, though. What was the general that perished over here? Is it... I think it's Alexander 10Q's general. The Nazgul's winning ever so slightly the fight over here for Mordor, but Temple Executioners, there's still a lot of Arthedain pikemen, but I think the battle will ultimately be won or lost based on how Angmar do at this stage. I feared that they would continue to drip feed their units in throughout the whole fight. I'm glad to see I was mistaken, and they did commit in a big way here, because that could be what wins this fight for his team. Angmar halberds on the warpath. Blackguard as well. The Hammerguard may have been introduced to the business end of the Rangers, but the Blackguard were not. And they are healthy, unlike the dismounted Knights of Numinous they are facing. I think the defenders may very well be having their resistance broken here. Still trolls left alive, still 5 of them there. Trolls of Angmar are not quite as tanky as the trolls of Gundabad. I think they will, however. If they're not careful, all of these units could return from routing. I think some of them have. Not all of them at this point, however. Arthedain may very well need all of these units to return from routing, to be honest. Blackwatch Legion are finding their way to the town centre. It's not looking good for Arthedain at this point. They're slowly losing in all of their engagements at this stage. And it could be that the forces of evil once again take a town that Eclipse was holding. Albeit this one was already in ruins. I imagine even in its broken state, the Orcs will not allow these elven structures to stand should they see themselves over the line here, which I think they will. I think at this point it just comes down to a question of quality. I don't believe that the defenders have got what it takes to withstand a unit of Witcher on Blackguard that is as healthy as this. There is also the Temple units on the other side, which while weakened are still healthy enough. And these halberds can probably do with getting into the back of these dismounted Knights of Numinous, and that is what they will do. Hasten the demise of these brave Arnorian Knights. Bit of extra AP damage never went amiss, and you can see how quickly that tilts the fight in their favour. Melkor's Chosen running through, causing some of these units to return. They did go after the Rangers in the end, though. Blackwatch Legion and Trolls, so yeah. This is going to be, once again, an attacking victory by the looks of things. Those Hammerguard took a lot of damage, but here they stand. They are in the town centre. There's the Angmar General. And down here... well, these Arthedain pikemen are putting up a very brave fight, but a rear charge here from the Melkor's Chosen could put an end to that brave fight. They're already shaken, facing off against Temple units as it is. That wasn't really a charge, though. Could it be? Could it be that these pikes can kill the Melkor's Chosen? I'm not entirely sure. Temple units are battered and bruised. The Nazgul have taken a couple of losses as well, but yeah, these pikes, ultimately, they will rout. Ooh, witches. getting grilled. Grilling themselves to a certain extent as well. Evandim archers being engaged by the Melkor's Chosen. And the foul green fire of the Witchers streaking through. And what very little remains of this brave Arthedain effort is going to be thwarted here. And I have to say, I think one portion of the mounted Knights of Illuminus perished over here. But to be fair, a lot of that dead wargs. I don't know what happened to the Arthedain cavalry, but whatever happened with it, the defenders did not use it well enough. If you're going to bring 2 units of Lance Knights as they did, and you had the opportunity to get them out of the settlement later on as they did, you have to do better than they did here. You need to score decisive blows with them. And they didn't, and ultimately that's where the battle started to get away from Arthedain, really, because up until that point I thought Arthedain were quite comfortable, and they did reasonably well. But the misuse of the cavalry here, I think, has, well, it has been terminal. There's no think about it. Victory down there, Mordor. Mordor very, very battered and bruised. Angmar still have something resembling an army left standing, but close. 5% the differential in favour of the forces of darkness. Very merry, isn't it? And that is going to be that. I'm not entirely sure what's still fighting, if I'm being honest. The sounds of battle are still here. But no... Ah, there we are. Arthedain pikemen being killed. They were already perpetually routing though. And there he goes. I think that's it, isn't it? Ah, here we go. Still some Evandim units. And there goes Eclipse's general. Well, I think it was the cavalry thing that caused Arthedain's loss here, but other than that, it was a well-organised defence. As it is often with the defenders, though, if you can't use your damage dealers to good effect, like the cavalry, or good enough effect, I would say, devastating effect, cavalry, rangers, javelins, Arthedain made decent use of them, but not amazing use of them, and that often is the standards that you have to meet if you want to be victorious as the defenders, especially with a faction like Arthedain, because Arthedain don't have the punch in melee to be able to rely on a strong defensive line in the way that a Khazad-dûm, for example, would have been able to do, or an Imladris, something like that. But yeah, I think the attackers, they were in danger there of a non-unified attack and not being brave enough being their undoing, but in the end, Angmar, when they did decide to attack, they attacked in a big way, and ultimately that was the decision which pushed the attackers over the edge of victory. And fair play to them, because I wasn't sure they were going to do it for a long time there, but they ended up doing so in the end. Let's see what did the damage for the defenders. Dismounted Knights doing quite well. Warns of the North getting 360 kills, so that's very nice. 406 kills on Arthedain marksmen. I imagine they were on lower tier units, but that's still a very impressive tally. Dunadine Troll Slayers, mixed fortunes for them. 72, I would argue, isn't really good enough. 150 odd kills, however, is. These Arthedain pikes did not do well enough at all. Like, they were the basis of your defence. They need to be getting better kills than that, because kill counts that low indicate that they were killed off too easily. The phalanx was broken too quickly. Dunadine Rangers 398, that's decent for Rangers, but obviously with the standards, Rangers are often held to. Evandim Spearmen with 449, that must have been the unit that was facing off against Angmar's Snaga. That's the only way you would see a unit of Evandim Spearmen get that high a kill count. But it does go to show how useful they are as militia when facing off against Orc trash. Mounted Knights for Nunas with only 38. Again, you can see the units that you needed to perform better from an Arthedain perspective if they were to be victorious. I imagine it's a similar story here. To be fair, Alexander's Troll Slayers did better across the board, as did his pikes, so that's something. His Evandim Spearmen didn't do quite as well, but once again, I'd be most interested to see where his cavalry were. Dunadine Rangers very similar to Eclipse's tally. Yeah, 74, it's not enough. You need to be getting over 100. I'd say you need to be getting close to 200 kills with those cavalry units, getting good charges off against good targets. to make them pay for themselves here, and they had the opportunity to do it. They just didn't execute well enough on that. Some of their ranged units needed to be in better positions and being more efficient as well. And those are the standards you have to play to if you're the defenders, because it's unforgiving if you're on the defence against a force which vastly outnumbers you, as you could see here. And in the end, the attackers had a decent game plan. They executed it well. So yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending this one to me. Big thank you to all of the players for being a part of this battle replay as well. As I said, the next replay that will come out will almost certainly be Osgiliath. And like I said, I have a Cardland outpost and a Merlond siege and Reforged to get on with as well. There is also, Silmarillion stuff. I tend to record it as quickly as I can because it's more likely to have sort of build requirements, which I may then outdate, and that can result in obviously desynced battle replays, which are no good to anyone. So I can't really plan a month in advance with Silmarillion because I don't know what replays I'm going to get from that. Whereas Reforged, I have a little bit more of an idea a little bit further in advance. So yeah, the next replay will be an Osgiliath one, I think. The streaming stuff has been, from my perspective, it's been interrupted at this point because of various bits and pieces, but by this point it probably will have already got back onto a more regular track. So yeah, big thanks to all of the players once again, and to Eclipse for sending this one in to me. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.